The Christmas update is rolling out for your for your Tesla, and that Christmas update includes version 12.2.2, and that's coming out right now. Elon says on X that that 12.2.2 is amazing, but then what do you expect? That's what he always says. But Tesla's account on X, not Elon's account, but Tesla's account, says that Robotaxi will be here sooner than you think. I had a little back and forth text exchange with Brian Wang about that. Brian's thinking, do you think that means February, March? And I said, well, most people don't think it's even going to happen in June or July. So maybe they're talking about the June or July, which will be sooner than probably most people think. Doesn't really matter. If it comes sometimes this year, that'll be fantastic. If it doesn't come till January, February next year, it'll be fantastic. But according to the Tesla account, it's coming sooner than you think. By the way, this is going to be, I'm extremely excited about what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Please stay to the end, at least give it a chance. Stay for at least 5 or 7 minutes because maybe you'll find it very boring. I don't know. And I'd really love to hear your comments about it. All right. So, okay. Subject number 2 on the news of today. The debate continues about regulations and insurance with regard to the Robotaxi. Now, according to Gary Black, there's a California requirement for automated ride hail that requires Tesla to be liable and to provide insurance. And I didn't know that. That's news to me. I haven't checked on it, but we'll just go with Gary on that. But guess what? It doesn't matter. This is how I've always seen it. As a graduate of law school, I always have to say that. I could say as a lawyer, except I never took the bar. Couldn't stand those people. Anyway, but as a graduate of law school, it's like plain and simple. I mean, Tesla is going to be liable for anything that car does that causes an accident. If some other car causes the accident, no. But if the car is in an accident when full self-driving is on, when it's unsupervised, no, it's no longer the people that are in the car or the owners of the car that will be liable. It will be Tesla. And yeah, Tesla will insure all the rides. They'll be liable for all the accidents. They will admit that up front. They will say that they are, I think. Maybe not. Maybe the lawyers won't let them. Tesla might actually choose to also indemnify the owner of the car, or if not, maybe they'll charge some small amount for additional insurance to take the place of an outright indemnification, because there's going to be edge cases. Maybe the owner of the car failed to maintain the car, failed to air up the tires, or the tires were running really low of tread. Or maybe they'll be like Uber and Lyft, who have some requirements, and you have to have your car inspected. I don't know how often that happens. I know to get started, you have to have an inspection. Anyway, the real news today about all of this is this video from Herbert. I'll introduce it in more detail in a minute, but the video got me thinking about a chapter that I left out of the Elon Musk mission, not the mission, I got that wrong, out of the Elon Musk method. You know, I have 16 superpowers in there, 16 things that Elon Musk does that are just on another level, But I left one out, and it really matters, and that is imagination. Yeah, imagination. I have a definition here. Imagination is the ability to get outside of the mundane business of daily living or of merely feeding off of the imagination of others and start to contemplate what could be. How's that for a definition of imagination? Let me know in the comments below. Does that seem like a good definition? Maybe you have a better definition or you'd like to add to my definition, but that's my definition for today. Anyway, I watched this debate. This was on Herbert. It was between Gary Black and Dan Ives. And then Jeff Lutz was on the show too. He was providing additional commentary. Of course, Herbert was running the whole thing, and he had some thoughts as well. It was great. Total hat tip to Herbert. I've already sent him a DM telling him that I thought it was a great show. Very, very well done. All right. But what I realized while watching it was actually an epiphany for me. You see, I have an extremely active imagination. I have very active imagination. I've always had an active imagination. It's not something that I have pride in any more than I have pride in my height or my blue eyes. I mean, it's just what I have. It's built in, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe everybody has as much imagination as I do, and they just haven't developed it or use it, or I don't know. I don't really have insight into that, even with a degree, undergraduate degree in psychology, because I don't remember studying imagination as part of my 4 years of looking at psychology. Anyway, but whatever the case may be, Elon Musk has imagination on steroids. It's beyond everybody else's imagination. But it isn't always fun for him. I know this. He's talked about it. He gets no rest from that hyperactive brain that's always contemplating what could be. And he talks about it. He talks about that that's what he thinks about. What could be? How could the world be better? How could things be better? How could they be more exciting? How could they be more interesting? As well as the fact that it wears him out and that it's a constant thing. And he doesn't fear death at all. He welcomes death at some point just to get a rest, he says. So there are dangers also to imagination. What I imagine, what I have imagined over the years, doesn't always come true, not at all. And that can make me appear to be lying or just unreliable, as it does Elon. Oh, I think we'll have, robotaxis by next year, by the end of this year. Oh, well, then you don't have it. And then is that a lie? Is that unreliability? Or is that just optimism because his imagination is telling him, yeah, we can do this thing? Yeah, it gets him in trouble. Gets him in trouble with lots of people. People don't trust him as a result. And I've seen this in my life. Sometimes it can result in spending time or money on pipe dreams instead of stuff that is more reliably going to convert to results like profit or market share. And again, Elon has been criticized for this. Why don't you just go ahead and do that, low-priced car instead of running off and doing Optimus or, some other project that isn't going to bring immediate increases in profits and result in the stock going up maybe more. I take my hat off to those who are really level-headed or even negative Nellies. You need to have balance in the world. And sometimes that balance is not contained within one person. Sometimes you're all about optimism and there's not a pessimistic bone in your body. And that can be bad. But the opposite's not so great either. Or maybe you think you're really well sitting in the middle. You are just realistic. I hear lots of people saying, no, I'm not an optimist or a pessimist. I'm a realist. Well, guess what? That realism can be great. I mean, let me give you an example. Let me give you the example of Apple. Obviously, Steve Jobs had an imagination on the order of Elon Musk's imagination. And as a result, you had a very exciting, growing, dynamic company that took lots and lots of risks. And the good news was for Elon Musk and for Steve Jobs, they usually had it right. That's not always true for people who have these wild imaginations. Well, then Tim Cook comes along and takes over, and he's like managing the company to a fare thee well. And the stock's value has gone up and up and up. But the company is not nearly as innovative as it was under Steve Jobs. So it isn't one is better. Steve Jobs is not better than Tim Cook. And if somebody else came along that was even less innovative, but still built the company well, they wouldn't be less. It's just different kinds of folks. So when you have a product like FSD or Robotaxi or Optimus, which is going to plow completely new ground in a way that's not even imagined, speaking of imagination, it wasn't even on most people's imagination 10 years ago, then you have to do some imagining. I mean, 10 years ago, sure, we've had HAL and we had all, robots in all these movies and whatnot. And, those things may be coming true, but what we didn't have was anybody imagining that they really were. I mean, really, it really was a few people building humanoids 10 years ago, and they were lab experiments. Anyway, But once you move into the new world that you are imagining, you have to also be able to imagine how different people will react to that new world. And this is what Elon Musk does also. This is what I do. This is what Brian Wang does. That's why I'd love to have Brian on. It's because I know he's taken it to the next level. Because you can't just merely project your own possible response onto the rest of the population. You are probably even wrong about your own response. Think about it, how often that you've thought, well, this is what I would do in that situation. When the situation comes around, that isn't what you do. You are certainly going to be wrong if you think your spouse or your kids or your next door neighbor or your parents will respond the same as you to any of these things. We've seen that so often with FSD so far, where somebody loves FSD and they drive it 100% of the time, and they get their spouse in the seat or they get their parents in the seat. No, not interested, not excited, not going to do it. So everybody has these differing responses, and the imagination, the looking forward and thinking about how will different people respond to all these opportunities as they come along. How many people will stop driving entirely and just use robotaxis? How many people that keep their cars and have FSD will use it 100% of the time? How many will actually upload and become individuals who are paying $100 a month or pay 8 or 10 or 12 or 15,000? How many people will put their cars out to rent when they're not using it? How many people will buy additional cars and start putting those out in order to build a fleet and actually turn it into a decent business? Those are the kind of things that people with imagination start doing. Now, some people just look at by analogy. As Elon says, analogy is great. History is wonderful. And so people will look by analogy. They'll say, well, how many drives is Uber getting? How many drives is Lyft getting? How many taxi cabs are there? How many, and you start doing that, and you can see, okay. I think Gary Black said it's 8 billion between Uber and Lyft, 8 billion rides. Well, all right, 8 billion rides. If Tesla takes 20% or 25% or 50%, so you put your number on that and you say, how many will Tesla get? And now you can start to extrapolate. Great, you'll get a number. But man, that's not imagination. That is extrapolation, interpolation. That is reasoning by analogy. I used to sell locks. I don't talk about the lock business very often, but that's how I started out. I thought that if I had the very best lock in the world that was basically foolproof, everybody would want one and they'd be willing to pay more for it. You know what I found out? Most people won't buy a new lock until they've had a theft. In fact, sometimes even if they had the theft, if the lock isn't broken, they won't even buy a new lock then. Maybe if their neighbor had a theft, maybe that might cause them to go out and buy a new lock. Maybe they'll consider it, but otherwise not a chance. Nobody buys the new lock until they've got that loss, okay? So that was kind of interesting to me. You got to think about the psychology of these individuals. Will they or will they not buy based on a great selling proposition? And of course, that's what I've been doing all my life, bringing hundreds, I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of products to market and finding out what are the consumers going to do if I bring this product to market. So let's apply it to FSD and Robotaxi. In Elon's imagination, as he has explained it, nobody who can own a car, nobody, not one single soul who can own a car that drives itself 100% and that it is safer by far than driving will want to drive their own car. Because why? They can play games, they can watch a movie, they can talk to their friends, they can play cards, they can sleep. And he says, all of those things are possible. And so he thinks it's 100%. Everybody will switch to FSD unsupervised when it becomes a thing. And, there might be some differentiation based on what it costs. But if you figure that out, you'll find a price point eventually, like say you do with the iPhone, where everybody jumps in. You've got a couple of other players and they've got some cheaper ones. And so eventually you get everybody just about that is using an iPhone. or something like that, a smartphone. Now, they'll have a few outliers, some people who like to drive, some who are fearful, some can't afford it, some will just have inertia, and they will stay with what they have until they just absolutely move on to the next car, and maybe then they make the change. Anyway, so there's a bunch of people that will not fit Elon's imagination on this. So there has to be a number. And that's what smart marketers do and are trying to find out. The green eye-shaped types will assume it's 10%. Elon assumes it's 100%. Well, so what do you do? So one of the things I do, for instance, I did a poll. I did a series of polls actually last week. That's what marketers do. They start asking questions. Elon is also probably the best marketer I've ever seen, maybe in history, but he listens. Where does he listen? On X. He has lots of other places he can listen to, but X is perfect. He can listen all day long to what people are saying about his products. Anyway, but I did a small poll about giving up driving and taking cybercabs 100%. And about 50% said never. It was a little less than 50%, said never. But you know what that means? 50% consider it to be a real possibility right now. So it was a small poll. You know, I'm not going to spend $1,000 or $100,000 to go out and find out, ask 10,000 people or 1,000 or 2,000. But the couple of hundred people that did respond, it gives me a clue as to what might actually happen. Anyway, now the imagination meets some reality. The next issue is how much will somebody pay for that world? In this case, they will actually pay less. It turns out they'll actually pay less if they decide to use a future Tesla with full autonomy. It will cost them less to drive than it does to drive a regular, old ICE car that doesn't have autonomy. So it will be a good deal all around. But let's say it costs an extra $100 a month or $200 a month. What will people pay? So this is one reason that Elon and the Uber bulls like me see a mass potential for the future, is that it's actually going to be cheaper to use Uber. I mean, not to use Uber, to use Robotaxi or cybercabs than it is to own your own car. Well, next, then we have to imagine, keep on imagining now. Think about this. How will the various stock, I got stock on the mind. How will the various stakeholders respond to the situation? You've got the competitors, you've got the government, you've got the ones who will lose their current jobs if this becomes a thing. You have the investing public, and there's many other stakeholders involved. Now, that would take us way too long for this video, but we might at least want to spend a minute on the government. Elon's imagination tells him that if he shows up with the stats and proves that the vehicle is not only safer than a human, but many times safer, and that it's safer than Waymo, which already has permission to operate autonomously, then it would be immoral not to let the product go forward, because if it's safer than humans, duh, you got to turn it loose. However, a dash of reality would then bring in the cab drivers, the existing car companies, the unions, and others who might lose in such a world, and they might send their lobbyists to various state and federal governments around the world to try to interfere. You might also have administrators that just don't get it or just don't like Musk. When did that happen? This is why the stock went up recently, is because the folks that don't trust and don't like Musk, they just lost power at exactly the right time, just as Robotaxi is going to become a thing. Anyway, the government changed. Now it's far less likely to get in the way. In fact, like seat belts or like airbags, the government might even require it at some point. It might take a year or 2 years, but at some point, the government might say, you know what, we're going to give you guys 5 years, but all cars are going to have this. You say, oh, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? They might take away the wheel and the pedals, and I might not be able to drive in the future? Well, think about it. Someday soon, you might be a menace to other drivers and cyclists and pedestrians compared to automated vehicles. Not speculatively, but provably dangerous. You could really be it's just a danger. People might even roll down their windows and yell at you for putting them in danger. I don't know when that would have ever happened in some kind of COVID emergency. Anyway, they might paint horrible things on your car for not getting in line with the more virtuous among us. Now, you know I'm a total right-wing conservative. I'm not talking about maybe what I think is the perfect world, because maybe I believe that if people want to continue to drive a unsafe vehicle, maybe to a certain extent we have to let them. I don't know. That's a good question. Let me know in the comments below what you think that trade-off is. I can make the case for freedom easily, but honestly, you can't drive 120 miles on a city street. You can't drive drunk. You can't weave in and out of traffic. And someday you might not be able to drive the cars because they won't even have the equipment. So will Tesla merely take 25% of the current Uber and Lyft business by 2030, or will it put both of them out of business or cause them to shift to partner status with Tesla? Will that be the TAM, the total TAM? Or do we add in all the taxi cabs? And then do we start adding folks who give up their cars? And then do we add in some who move from public transportation like buses, etc., into robotaxis and cybercabs? Elon thinks it will even take some of the airplane business, like, for instance, LA to Las Vegas, which is a trip that is, I've made up, I don't know how many hundreds of times, which theoretically is an hour plane ride or a little less, but takes 4 hours. By the time I drive to the airport park, you know the story. So you'd rather get in a car and have the car take you there in 4 or 5 hours than to get in a plane, and might be less expensive. And you get to watch the view and not be jammed in there sitting where people you may not want to be sitting next to. Anyway, will people who own a car opt out for a robotaxi to go out on Saturday night to avoid parking and not have to worry about their drinking plan for the night? Will people send their kids to school in a cybercab? You know, the list goes on and on about ways, and I'm just beginning to use my imagination as to which way people might be acting in the future once this happens. Deliveries, you know, there's a bunch of stuff here. Anyway, as noted above, it might mean that half of all trips are now by robotaxi, and Tesla has half of that business, and it's worldwide. If you start doing the numbers on that, half the trips, half the world, half the business, and worldwide, okay, make it a quarter of the trips, a quarter of the business, and it's worldwide. It's still way, way, way big. Now, my imagination of the perfect ending might not happen, but it has some percentage chance of being the outcome. And that percentage chance is the optionality in the stock. I would claim that right now that optionality is probably around $100 of the total, and that's for both Robotaxi and Optimus combined. Now, if we go, that would be 330 billion. I mean, that's a lot of optionality, right? If we go back to $500 a share, maybe the optionality is now $150 a share. If we get more good news, which increases the percentage chances, then it goes up even more. But right now, that is where the stock price is moving. It's moving around in this optionality area with regard to these three, if you count FSD as a separate product, these three products. So I have, that is my story about imagination. Some people have a little, some people have more, some people have a lot, some people have too much. Well, is there ever too much? But sometimes the too much can be. Anyway, I've already gone through all that. Let me know in the comments below what you think about what I've just said. Now, it turns out that I have so much content lined up. I have so much stuff I want to talk about right now that I'm just going to have to keep pushing it out. So there'll be 4 videos today. There might be 3 tomorrow, which normally on Sunday I only have 2, because you're going to be watching the. But you know, you can watch the game, turn off the sound, and listen to the video at the same. I do that all the time. I do that almost every Sunday now. Anyway. But already today, we had Brian Wang starting off the morning talking about his newest price target. He was so close. I mean, he said 450 by the end of January. Nobody was even close to that. He gets the big, smiley face on the fridge. Then we had ex-Rivian exec Phil Beisel, who turns out to be a friend of almost all of my other co-hosts, talking about the ways that Optimus will be used, and even my wild and crazy imagination didn't conceive of some of the things he has in mind. Later on tonight, I'm going to have another video where I'm going to talk about the potential margin beat on Tesla vehicles on January 22. We're talking about maybe, as Brian Wang says, Brian Wang just says he thinks it'll be over 20%. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how we get there. So stay tuned for that one. That's why you hit notify. You can't use notify unless you are a registered user, unless you're a subscriber. And by the way, thanks to everybody. My subscriber list is growing fast right now. I hope this continues. So hit that subscribe button, and then you can always hit the like button. That'll really help the channel. And then what would help me? I keep mentioning this is Christmas, and I know you're spending all this money on friends and family and maybe to Salvation Army and stuff. And if you end up having $3 left over and you wouldn't mind throwing that $3 my way every month, or 5 or 10, or there's a couple of guys at 50, okay, a month, every month, they send me $50. Why? Because they think the content is useful and they want to support the channel. Anyway, Patreon down below, you know what to do. Just go down there, you click the button, it takes you to Patreon, you sign up, it takes like minutes, and you can add yourself to the list of folks that are supporting the channel. All right, that's all I got right now. I'll be talking to you again later, but for now, it's been great talking to you.